Welcome to another episode of the Business Spotlight. I am joined today by our guest, Ben Bobo. He is the co-founder, president, and CEO of Retriever Medical. Ben, number one, thank you for taking the time to share your story, your journey in business. And, Business Spotlight, like we talked about a little while ago, it's great for many reasons. Number one, Ben, it's going to help get you exposure to my personal network and the people here in Las Vegas. So I'm excited to learn more about yourself, your story, your company. And without further ado, Ben, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, hey, thanks Edgar for having me on the show. And so my background sort of started in the Air Force. That's where I live here in Vegas. I get to see the folks from Nellis come flying over my backyard from time to time. But the journey sort of started in the Air Force, and from that point, it was a springboard into business. And I ended up in the medical device industry in a series of startups that were acquired by larger medical device startups. And now I'm with a company called Retriever Medical, where our mission is to develop core technology to treat venous thromboembolism, or another way to say it, blood clots in the lungs and the legs. And with the advent of COVID and the vaccines and everything that's been going on, there's just been a proliferation of blood clot issues and challenges within this segment. And so our company is really highly focused on removing the blood clots from the body and making sure we get whole clot removal from the vessels and vasculature in the body.
That's fantastic. Yeah, health is definitely important, and that's something that can be overlooked, especially in today's society. With the way technology is, it makes us very lazy.
Yes, indeed.
We got to get out, and it's definitely good to see that you are out there, making an impact, making a difference. Which leads to my first question is, Ben, what do you feel is most misunderstood about your industry?
Well, I think in medical devices, people tend to look at it as a very scientific base, and it is to some degree. And the barriers to entry are really like, well, can I really learn the technology and learn the lexicon of medical terminology? And can I have credibility when I'm getting in front of doctors or investors or whatever? And I think people put all these sort of barriers mentally into place that really can block their opportunities, because everybody has tremendous opportunity. And sometimes you just got to have that confidence to take that leap and take that jump into med tech, medical device, biopharma. And so I would argue and encourage listeners to not get diluted or clouded by those sort of visions of, wow, these are very smart people, and will I be, considered credible and all these things, and just take the leap and learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can.
Yeah. And I think that's very helpful information, right? It's education. You're learning, and you got to be aware of what's going on out there. Ben, part of the goal of the Business Spotlight is to educate and inspire people who are wanting to pursue entrepreneurship or are thinking about getting into business. With that being said, what's been your biggest learning curve since you started in business in the industry?
It's funny in business. The thing I like about business is that you learn something new every day. There's no question. I'm a CEO of a company, and there's always a new lesson, a new little, element in business that you can learn. So I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, don't get hung up on what you don't know. Who cares about that? The goal should always be learn as much as you can, as quickly as you can, and know where you're at, and that's okay. That is totally okay. So I think if you kind of go into the right mindset of just, I want to be a sponge, I want to absorb, and then I'll apply as I get more experience and I get more sort of relativity to other aspects of a business, finance, manufacturing, account, whatever it may be, you can bring that together eventually in the collective of your mind and understand it in its complexity. But I think you have to have a spirit that says, you know what, I'm going to jump in. And again, whatever the discipline is, learn as much as I can, as quickly as I can.
Yeah. And I think that's really important, is the learning curve, right? Because everyone's journey is different. But if you learn to educate yourself, a little bit every single day, what that can compound to by the end of the year is massive, right? And to echo what you said, right, is the intake of knowledge is, even if you don't know everything, the relationships that you're building and the strategic partnerships you have out in the community, they're subject matter experts in what they're doing. And you surround yourself with people like that, you'll have an answer for people pretty fast, right? No matter what industry you're in.
That's right.
So that's really good. Now, for you, Ben, what is your favorite part about being an entrepreneur and CEO?
Well, I think it's the freedom and flexibility, because when you're the CEO, a lot of people report to you. You are accountable to the board of directors, but in what I'm doing, it gives you freedom and flexibility because new technology, new adaptation, we can improve patient outcomes, we can improve quality of life. And it's a whiteboard when you first start out. You have an idea of a design of a technology. You understand the clinical unmet need that isn't present today. But if you had a technology, could radically improve patient, outcomes, quality of life. And so it's kind of a whiteboard. If you're comfortable with that uncertainty, you go into it with a lot of unknowns, and it's sort of solving the puzzle as you go along in time, right? So the business starts as an infant, as it's sort of maybe waddling a little bit, and it starts to crawl, and then it gets up and starts to walk, and you see that progression. And there's just tremendous excitement in seeing that growth of the business, seeing your own growth, seeing the growth of the people you work with. And so for me, that sort of fuels the fire and the excitement. But again, it's the accountability is all on you. There's nobody coming up to me every day saying, hey, Ben, did you do X, Y, and Z? Hey, did you get this project done? You either get it done or you don't. And if you don't get it done, investors won't vote for you. They won't put their money in the business. And if they have their money in the business, you probably won't be there long as a CEO. So it really takes high degree of accountability, intentionality, and making sure you sort of tip of the spear in terms of the lead of the organization. And for me, I love all those aspects because I get up and I get to create every day sort of the world and role that I want to create for the business as we drive along, collectively as a group and a team.
Yeah, there's so much good information right there in what you just said. Big thing I heard was you have a board of directors that you're accountable to. And a lot of what we've coached a lot of business owners other than your coach, do you have a board of directors for your company? And I think it's a critical part in those companies who go from good to great. When they have somebody that is holding them accountable within their sphere, there are also other CEOs, right? And having those board of directors, you hold each other accountable, but you also get to brainstorm with them through some of the barriers that we have to push through in business. So I think you get away some really, really gold information that people will definitely get a lot of value in this conversation. Now, for you, Ben, who's the most influential person in your life, and how have they impacted you?
Well, to take it to a spiritual realm, I think God's been, right? The values that I was raised with. You're going to go through challenges in life. You're going to go through those rough patches. And the question is, what's your anchor? What's your foundation? You have to have that. Even in a business, you have to have something core you can go back to as you're going through things that don't make sense, as you're going through sort of the fog of a business. And, some days you'll walk in and it feels like it's the end of the business, right? And so that perspective that I've been able to glean is really my connection relationship to God. And then beyond that, I think it's the people in your life, your friends and family that you can really trust. Now, listen, when I talk about family, there's some good aspects of family. And then there's family members, I think everybody can resonate, that aren't always out there for your better or best interest. And you got to be able to decipher that and understand that, because ultimately your performance is based on what happens up here, your ability to manage stress and your ability to deal with things. And if you have people undercutting that slightly, right? I'm not talking their full frontal force direct. Sometimes it's very subtle, and you got to be able to distinguish and have the wisdom to see that. And so whether it's families or friends, you got to be able to prune that tree to make sure you're on mission, on course. So people are important as long as they're the right people in life, and some belief system beyond this world that gives you perspective in your current journey.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's very important, right? That having that spiritual health, right? And knowing that that's something that can ground you. I know in the military, you being Air Force, me in the Marine Corps, we always preach it's God, country, Corps, right? And maybe a little different in the Air Force, but it's always, higher above our country and then our branch. So very, very valuable information for people who don't, aren't looking to ground themselves. And it's helped me in my journey, going through the stuff that we went through in Iraq. That grounding technique and going through making sure that our mental health, even as a stress that business can put on a CEO and owner, because you got a lot of people that you're accountable to. You employ, you're putting roofs and over their heads, food on their plates. And, that's very, very impactful. That actually leads to my next question, Ben. What advice would you give 20-year-old Ben who is just getting into business?
That's a profound question. For me, it's really simple to answer. I should have become a CEO at 25. Now, people say, what are you talking about? And what I mean by that is, knowing what I know now sitting here, I wish my 25-year-old self or early 20-year-old self would have just taken that leap. Because again, you have a lot of people that speak in your life, and certainly you're learning, you're on a rapid learning trajectory in your 20s. But see, the problem is you think in your 20s, I just don't know enough to go take that leap into the next level. That's sort of the restraining factor we all sort of run with. And then we have people that sort of put little seeds and plants in our mind, maybe of doubt. And so what I would suggest to your listener base is wherever you're at today, if you have a goal or a dream of something you want to do it. And so you think about a CEO, that's what I'm doing today. And you say, well, how can you be prepared to be a CEO at 25 or 24? The secret is you go do that and find that company, that product and service. When you hire or have consultants in key core disciplines, such as finance, accounting, manufacturing, R&D engineering, whatever it may be, they will have the expertise. Your job is to amalgamate that expertise into a business strategy and a direction forward. And in that process of working with those people, you'll learn a lot. Now, in my medical device background since 92, yes, I learned a lot the more traditional ways, sales, marketing, business development, leading engineering teams, etc. But what I learned from all that is I could have done this at 25, just being the titular head and then bring these people on board, and you're going to learn a lot. And then you say, well, what if you fail? Great, fail fast and fail forward. That's okay, because in that process, you learn so much for the next opportunity, and you just add to your reservoir of knowledge, insight, and your instincts as a business person.
Yeah. And that's, man, this is such a valuable conversation. Fail fast, fail forward, overcome, right? And then it's those little failures. In the military, we're trained failure is not an option. And now in the business world, we learn from those failures that make us who we are, right? How do we persevere after we failed? And that's why it's important to surround yourself, like you talked about earlier, having that accountability piece, the board of directors, the friends, family, and learning to decipher all the other noise to say, okay, that is actually really valuable information. Let me apply that to business. And that's what we do in books, right? Like with the books that you read, it's only as good as the implied knowledge that you actually imply into the business. And if it didn't work, why didn't it work? Did I misread that? Did I misinterpret it? Let me go back and reread it, try it again. And in the coaching world, it's test and measure. Just like any business, you got to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And man, I'm getting such good value out of this conversation. I know the viewers will truly enjoy it. That leads to one of the other questions I have is, how do you push through your biggest business doubts?
Well, we've all heard that thing, false evidence appearing real is fear. I think the way I look at it is when you have business doubts and uncertainty, because that's by definition what business is. I mean, you can have 40 million in the bank and you can go through that quickly. Depends how big your organization is. So certainty is a relative term. So I think one of the things I've done as a strategy is when you're going through some really tough times, it's creating stress and anxiety and doubt. You have to change the picture. You have to change the roadmap. You have to change your blueprint. So, right, we grew up a certain way. Our parents give us a construct of what life is and how it's going to turn out. And if you do certain inputs, your life will be this way. And we all know, if we think about it, that's not really the case. And in fact, if I have a broken old roadmap or blueprint for my life or my business strategy, guess what's going to happen? If I keep trying to deploy that blueprint, I'm going to have the same anxiety that just builds on itself. So one of the things I've learned as a strategy is when I come up to something that seems insurmountable or challenging, I flip the script, I change the blueprint, I change the roadmap. So think about Fallujah, Iraq, talking about war. We know what happened to the American convoy that were the resupply convoy going in there. A lot of those guys got attacked, were hung from bridges, etc. Now think about that analogy. They went through an area they didn't appreciate how dangerous it was. The crazy part would be, an analogy is, if I kept going through that area after my troops just got taken out, again and again, I continue to suffer losses, people would say, you're crazy, you're stupid, you're not reading the environment. You need to change the roadmap and go a different way or create a different strategy around that event. And so simple for me is, how do I deal with stress? I'm constantly revising the roadmap and my blueprints for life and for business. And that way the stress, there really isn't none, because really what it's about is, right, you've heard of this: plan, do, check, act. And this constant revolving, you can have a strategy, you implement it, but you got to check on it to make sure it's effective. And when it's not, you keep pivoting to a better and better and better strategy. And therefore, for me, in my experience, the stress goes away. You feel like you have more control. And I'm not dogged tired to a old paradigm or roadmap that, quite frankly, hasn't been effective.
Yeah, 100%. That's, I'm telling you, this is a extremely good conversation. And as we're getting ready to wrap up the business spotlight, Ben, and us, going through COVID and we're at the tail end of it, along this journey of entrepreneurship and you being a CEO of a company now, what have you personally learned about yourself?
It's perspective. COVID, what's going on in this world, not argue, a lot of this is by design. I mean, none of this is just happenstance. It's a lot of things are orchestrated as I see it. And so it's really about having a perspective, understanding what the grand strategy is. So if you have a sense of what you think the strategy really is, it's much easier to deal with the noise coming in and what seems to be just fear-inducing everything, right? Because, look at the media, look at TV, look at everything. It does one thing very effectively is fear and control at some level. So I think as I look at the world of COVID and I look at the business and some of the insurmountable challenges, with time and age, you kind of sit back with a little different perspective, right? And that's really at the end of the day what it comes down to. What is your perspective? How do you choose to look at something? Because ultimately it's a choice.
Yeah.
I can look at something and say it's the end of the world or it's the beginning of an opportunity. So for me, through COVID and all this stuff, I've been able to have a perspective and develop a perspective. And oh, by the way, focus on health, working out every day, continue to feed the mind positive, healthy stuff, feel like I'm growing every day. Those are all foundational elements of getting through these crazy times. But I think it's also having that perspective to make sure, you know what, it's going to be okay. It has for time immemorial. And people today that try to prognosticate what the future is going to be, really, they don't know, but they're selling books on it. But they really, really don't know because nobody knows the future.
That's right. That's right. Well, Ben, what's the best way for people to connect with you, get a hold of you if they're looking, for what you guys do in your services?
Yeah, you can reach out to me. I'll give you my sort of private email at ben.w.bobo@gmail.com, ben.w.bobo@gmail.com, and connect with me if you have questions. I'm happy to converse and share with you some of my experiences, and hopefully I'll get to learn from some of your experiences.
Yeah. Well, Ben, thank you for being on this episode of the Business Spotlight. Before we wrap up, one final question. Is there a question that you wish I did ask that I did not ask?
I got to say your questions were just excellent. I'm just looking at your list here. I think, I don't know. I think we covered a lot here. There's really nothing, maybe it's like, when I started the business, what was it I thought versus what really happened, right? Because you all go into it with this, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed idea of an entrepreneur, and you think about Bill Gates, or maybe you think about Elon Musk, and if I do this, the world's my oyster. And so there's that sort of initial expectation versus the reality of the business. So maybe that's one question that maybe perhaps we answered. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Ben. We appreciate you being on this episode, and I look forward to connecting with you out there.
Thanks, Edgar. Enjoy the time. Take care.